Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. Today we're going to focus a little bit on crochet. And I thought, since I've been working on this crazy piece, that we would look at one of the elements that's being used in it. We looked at half double crochet the last time that I did a crochet video. And this is one that uses a decorative element. It's easier to spot in a half double crochet, so it's often used with that. It's called working through the third loop. Now what it can do, if you take a look here, it can turn the top of the stitch, these V's right here, so that you see them on the front. See if that'll come into focus right there. So what would normally, see down here, all of this section, you're working right straight through, right under what we call that top V. And then when we switched colors, that top V is turned to the front. It does it down here as well. And the way you do that is you work in the third loop of what is the whole top system of the stitch. So let's take a look with drawings at how that breaks down. And then we'll do it with real yarn, okay? Come on with me. Let's get to it. Quick caveat, after I finished filming all this, I'll probably stick this in before. Third loop and back loop only are different. I'm going to edit out as much of the language I used calling them the same thing, and I will do a follow-up video next week on back loop only. Today we're going to focus on going into the third loop, and I'll try to edit in some things to help make it clearer. As we mentioned in the introduction, we're working with crochet today, and we're looking at the third loop or the back loop. I'm going to interject here and say I'm clarifying this to say third loop, back loop only, or BLO, is a little bit different. We'll see if we can clarify that next week. Most of what I've filmed today is talking about third loop here, but let's just break this down with some descriptions. So you're working behind the top loop, or what we often call the top V. The top two strands of this whole network at the very top is usually what we go directly under when we are working a stitch. But now we're going into a different place. So this is a decorative stitch. It often, as I was saying in the introduction, it turns that top V that we usually go under, it turns it forward so you can see it, and it makes a really nice line. It's often used with half double crochet because the structure of that makes it a little easier to see. It's also often used when working in the round. When you're dealing with, I often talk about with the taller stitches, when you first make them, they look like the letter P with the top of the stitch and then what we often call the post. And then when you turn the work around, it can often look like a Q with the top and the post. So first made and then turned. But if you're working in the round, you don't turn. And when you don't turn your work, you always are dealing with these P's, and the back side will have that third loop. We'll talk a little bit more about that over here. The biggest difference from the traditional, or really the only difference from a traditional stitch, it's where the hook goes in the fabric. So what I recommend doing is tilt your work. You're going to turn it. Tilt your work so the top, you can see the top to view the back. You're going to push down on the back. You're looking at the back of the work and finding the correct loop to push through. It's only one loop instead of under two. That's what happens traditionally. And that's this, instead of through the work under the top V from the front. This is the traditional instructions. This is what you're doing right here instead. You're tilting the work, you're finding that back loop, and you're going under it. Looks really pretty when you can identify it, which is what we're going to do now. So let's take a look. Let's dissect it and diagram it the way I like to do. Here we go. All right, playing around with my lights a little bit. So what I've drawn here, and we're going to start color coding and breaking things down. What I've drawn here is the half double crochet stitch HDC. From the front, you've got, it's a short post, but you've got the post down below, and it's these 3 strands up here. I'm even going to take a little more of this out. This top part, which remember, we're looking at a P. The top part of the P is made up of 3 stitches. I'm editing as I go. We'll call this guy over here an overhead shot, because I'd like to call this the top of the stitch, and I don't want us to get confused. That means if you follow me on Instagram, my whiteboards before and after will have some edits to them. It's all good. So again, we've got the post. We're going to ignore that. That doesn't determine anything about where our next stitch goes into this. However, the top part, we essentially have 3 strands here. And usually a traditional stitch goes in there, goes into the hole between the top V and the bottom strand. Now that bottom strand actually is our 3rd loop. There are 3 loops involved up here. So let's color code them, and let's try to make them as different as possible. I'll also try to keep things somewhat bright. So we've got the top 2 strands. Let's make one of them blue, the one that we can see if we're looking straight at it from the front. Let's make the back one green. And let's make the bottom one orange. Now from this front view, that bottom one is often recessed and really hard to see. It's much easier to see from the back, which is where we want to work it from. So again, here is the top of our P. We have 3 strands. Now, if you tilt this, if you rotated this so that you're looking straight down on this top, the top 2 strands, here's what you would see. Most prominent would be that V, which is usually when I'm teaching people about basic stitches, that's what we're looking for, because that's what we want to go under on a traditional stitch. So again, that strand you could see from the front is right there. The back half of the V, that's a little harder to see from the front. You can definitely see from up top, but guess what? That bottom strand can see a little bit more pronounced. It'll look like it's hanging off, just under this, hanging off the back. But when you look at it from overhead, you can more clearly see. Now, if we were to continue, I've got this extra little crazy drawing over here. If we were to continue rotating this to try to see what we're working with, so we flipped the whole thing over, it'll look like another V from the back. That'll help you see that 3rd loop. So 1, 2, 3. We've got 1, 2. That's why it's called the 3rd loop. If you kept rotating it, you might see another V, and what you're really looking at is the back side of that top loop. And what makes up the other side of this back V is that 3rd loop. That orange guy is what we want to keep track of and what we want to use. Whatever way makes it easiest to see. If tilting the top makes it easier to see, great. If you have to keep tilting it so you can really see what you're going for, that orange loop is considered the 3rd loop. Interjecting here to clarify, the orange loop is the 3rd loop. I know it's going to go back to some footage where it says it's the back loop too. What we're going to do with 1, 2, and 3, 1 is front, 2 is back, the front loop, the back loop, 3 is the third loop. Three is the third loop, front loop, back loop, make up the top V, third loop back there. All of the pictures, everything else that I did today, we are talking about the third loop. So over here, back loop, third loop. So let's take a look at if you were told to do a half double crochet into that third loop. Once you go back there and find it, step 1 is to push into just that third loop. When you do that, this is what it looks like. This is my setup over here for a half double crochet. I'm going to keep the colors we used up here to see what's going on down here. So my loop, my yarn over, this is where I'm pushing. So let's color code it. It tilts that whole top, the very, very top V towards you. So what we have here, there's that top V. I've found that third loop from these pictures and I've pushed my hook under it. One way you can think of is from top to bottom through that, kind of picking it up, and it will stretch it out, especially if you're only going under one loop, it gets a little stretchy. But I have pushed under that third loop this way. And we're gonna yarn over and pull up a loop, just like a traditional stitch. Step 2, having just done that, here's what it looks like. We could add in new colors, but first let's color code all the things from up top that are still here. We have the first 2 loops that we have ignored. The back loop that we've pushed under is going to be pulled up and looking kind of funny. But here's the yarn over that we've pulled up. And for a half double crochet, we're going to yarn over again and then pull back through everything. And when you do that, it will look like this guy down here. What's important to note in this guy down here is you may not see that third loop anymore. It's going to hunker down behind the front 2 loops. So the back loop is a tool. If you want to see how the half double crochet, all the pieces in the breakdown, then watch the half double crochet video. This one was really just to see, I didn't even have to fill in that guy up top, but he's our last yarn over and pull through. The third loop isn't a visible part of the stitch. It's just used to anchor your stitch behind the top of this row. So let's take a look at it with real yarn. Here is my funky, crazy, at least 1 or 2 rounds of half double crochet going in a circle, kind of making it into a square as I go. And this row was just half double crochet. This row above it, I went straight through in the traditional way, and we just see holes. Now I've started my row going into the third loop. You can see how it's pushing this set of V's tilted towards the front. So let's take a look at this. If we were looking straight on at it, double checking which stitch I'm on this one right here. If I was going to do a regular half double crochet, I'd find the hole with this V on top and I'd go straight in. But we're not going to do that. And I try to find, there's that third loop from the front, and I want to go in between everything. but we're not doing a traditional stitch. So this guy, again, if you can find him from the front, he's hard to reach. He's not really going to pull towards the front. If we tilt so we're looking overhead at it, here are stitches 1 and 2. And it's still hard to see that third stitch, which is why you may want to keep rotating it to look at the back. Here's that funky looking V that's on the back. This right here, if I get my finger under it, is our third loop. So again, from the top, 1, 2, we're looking for the third. He's back here. We may have to tilt him totally upside down to see it. But we're going to push under him. So again, if we look at it from the front, like the drawing I just did, I've picked up that third loop. The first 2 loops are still here on the front. Looks kind of funny and kind of stretched. Yarn over, just pull up through what you push through. That's the rule in a lot of crochet. And now we're going to yarn over and go through everything. So again, if we tilt, we can see this is the one I've done. This is where I'm going next. You start to be able to recognize it once you're familiar with looking at it. But if you're not familiar, that top V is stitches 1 and 2. You want to find the back loop back here. Let's set up for a half double crochet. Push from the top down, yarn over and pull up a loop. We're totally ignoring those top 2 front 2 loops. For a half double crochet, we just pull through the whole thing. Now I have 2 more before I hit the edge. So let's do it again. Here's the top 2. Tilt it to find the back one. Go under it. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and go through everything. So I pushed in. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and go through everything. Now to show you the difference, see that right there? We have the front of the stitch. It creates a nice little ridge, decorative ridge. Now I'm going to do my corner here, which is 2 double crochets into this chain 2 space. Chaining 2 to turn my little corner. 2 half double crochets, I might have called them doubles, I meant half doubles, into the same hole. That makes my corner. Now technically, I really got to pull this over to find my first, remember it's a P. I didn't do that over here and I had to balance it out another way. There's a certain amount of fudging that happens with crochet. I'd like to do this side by just going under that regular V, more traditional so you can see the difference. So I'm going to find the hole. Here's my third loop, but I'm going to go between that and the top 2 loops. I'm going to go under that V from the front and pull up a loop. You can already see that that ridge that's over here is not going to be on this side. But let's do the whole side. Go under that top V, pull up a loop. Going to do the whole side. Going under that top V. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each side of this should have 6. Here's my last one. Whoop! If I catch my loop right. So let's see the difference. This has a decorative ridge. This doesn't. So let's keep going to show you more of that back loop. I got to make my corner. So into the chain 2 space, I'm just doing regulars, pushing into that big open gap, chain 2, 2 more half double crochets into the same hole. All right. And I think I'm going to skip this first guy to balance out what I did on the other side. So again, I turn it up. Here's the top V with strands 1 and 2. that I did, I went straight into over here. I want to keep turning. Okay, so 1, 2, this is still 2, this guy's 3. And if I look on the front, I should see strands 1 and 2 in front of me. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and go through everything. 1, 2, there's 3. Right there. One, 2, keep turning, 3. Other way to think about it is top, front, top, back. If you do it correctly, you should see strands 1 and 2, or the front top, tilted towards you. 1, 2. If I don't see it and I go here, if I think I've caught the 3rd loop, but I've really caught the 2nd, you'll see the difference. You'll only see 1 strand. I know I see a little bit up here, but if I do that again, I haven't tilted it far enough, you'll see 1 strand, but you won't see both of them. Things will get pulled apart. We're really going for this, where you can see a whole entire V in front of the stitch that you're making. So let's pull it out and complete that. 1, 2, 3. It's much cleaner looking when you catch that 3rd loop in the back. Correct for back loop, going straight in, a more traditional look. So thanks for joining us today. I don't think I ever introduced myself at the beginning of this video like I usually do. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. Coming to you from my house on Mondays, which is what I always do. And this Monday, it is a dreary looking day outside, so the lighting's all off in here, but you know, not the end of the world. 3rd loop, that's what it looks like. When you add it into other crazy things, right here, right up here, that's what it can look like. It looks pretty cool. We've got a bunch of them, I believe, in some of the earlier rows in here. It looks really cool when they're all stacked. It's fun. So, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. Feel free to check out the Sideshow. Feel free to subscribe here. Contact me if you'd like a lesson. We can work one-on-one. It's not super expensive, and I'm happy to help. We can do it over Zoom, long distance, or we can figure out sometimes you can come into the shop with masks to keep everybody safe. Craft on, joy and confidence. I love it. I hope you do too. Have a great day. How's the kitty? How we doing, huh? Yes, we do like this, don't we? Okay. Thank you for keeping me company in the background.